This is Coach Charles Rendelman at Ithaca Archery, and I'm working with Max. And believe it or not, we're going to be talking a little bit about intensity control and how intensity control is managed after anchor transfer and that sort of thing. So, a couple of minutes ago, Max and I were talking about this idea that since we do so much work to move the bow from set to anchor, while we're coordinating and thinking and breathing and all of this sort of thing, it might seem that most of our concentration and most of our effort happens at the beginning of the shot, and then once we reach anchor, we can sort of relax and wait until we're ready to execute the shot. And so I asked Max about that, and he's going to give us his explanation for that. So Max, what do you think? Is it true that we do most of our work and use most of our effort from setup, draw to load, anchor, transfer, or is it possible that we actually do more work after anchor? What do you think?
I think we do more work before anchor.
We do more work before anchor. So explain that to me a little bit. What do you mean by more work before anchor?
Well, I think I'm pulling more, kind of, and there's more movement.
Right. Okay. So maybe there's another way to ask that question. Is the work we do different from setup, draw to load, anchor, transfer, compared to the work we do after transfer through expansion and follow through?
I think it is. That there's more work, and the work is different.
Okay.
And it's harder. And
which part of the shot is harder?
The first part where you're between set and anchor.
Okay, so here's another question for you. Is it possible or is it easy to relax after you anchor?
No, not really, because I'm trying to make this shoulder blade come around and this one go that way.
In order to do what?
To get the follow through.
Okay, got it. And so this is something that I'm thinking about a lot, and so I'm hoping you can help me kind of understand what it's like from your point of view, because I'm exploring this idea, or I'm thinking a lot about this idea that since we do so much work in order to get the bow to anchor, it can be easy to forget to keep doing work after anchor. What do you think about that?
Yeah, I think you can't. I've forgotten sometimes to keep turning and pushing while I'm at anchor. Sometimes I just stop pulling and just hold it there, and then I shoot.
Okay, and what happens when you do that?
It's not as powerful.
It's not as powerful? Okay. Or consistent, maybe? I don't know. Am I putting words in your mouth?
Yeah, it's not as consistent.
Okay. So, you've executed your shot both ways, right? You've executed your shot with great follow-through by demonstrating, right, the technical term is intensity control, and the follow-through principle being tension and direction. Okay, I'm going to quiz you on that later. Is that fair?
I guess.
Really? Okay. I don't expect you to remember any of that technical terminology, but the action for you is to continue to push forward, and then to come around is the cue that we've been working, that's been working for you, right? And you have shot some arrows with that kind of moving forward, coming around, and you've shot some arrows without it. How easy is it to remember the push forward, come around?
I think it's pretty easy since I've done it a lot.
Okay.
For a while. But when I was first starting to do it, I forgot.
Okay.
A lot.
Okay. Is because kind of one of the things that I'm wondering is it, do you have to remind yourself to work harder after anchor, or does it kind of come naturally to you?
Well, it kind of comes naturally now that I've practiced it a lot. But before it did not come naturally. It was more like, wait, oh yeah, I have to do that.
Okay. So how about we take a minute and you demonstrate what we were working on before, just for a minute, because we're kind of, in addition to talking about this sort of intensity control moving forward, coming around after anchor, in order to have good follow through. We also decided, by we I mean I decided that we would spend some time reviewing the shot process and just being a little bit more careful about the way you move from set through anchor. So can you remember the analogy I used about the way your hands move from set to setup?
The raising the bow?
Yeah, raising the bow. I suggested that you were standing in what?
Water.
And what was the water doing?
The water was rising.
Okay, and so if the water's rising, your hands are going to come up separate or together?
Together?
Well, they're going to be on the same level, unless you're in a waterfall, right? You said if you're standing in a waterfall,
Then they're gonna be
yeah, your hands can come up however they come up, but
Or if your hands aren't floating.
that's got it. So, is it important for the hands to float up as the water rises?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to remember that your cue for raising the bow is going to be like you're standing in water. Your hands are floating on top of the water, and then the water rises, and then we're going to go back to your same familiar cue about move away, come around, in order to draw to load. And then I heard you say that you're getting pretty good at remembering to keep your shoulder blade moving, or strong at least, and in order to have good follow through. One more reminder. Do you know what that is?
What?
What do you think it is? There was one other thing that we were talking about earlier. Do you remember what that is?
My head staying up?
Keep your head up. You got it. Yep, hold your head up. Okay, so go ahead and let's run through a shot. Do you want me to talk you through it, or do you want to go ahead and execute it with your
I'll go
own?
ahead and do it.
Got it. Can I ask you a question before you start? Do you ever tell yourself these cues as you're going through the shot, or do you kind of have them like a bundle somewhere in your brain, and then you just sort of go, I'll remember, and then just go through your shot?
While I'm doing it, I kind of think, okay, this is it, and then, or right before I do it, I think about what I'm doing.
Okay.
And then I do that.
Okay. Before you give me any feedback, let's shoot those last two arrows, and then I'm really curious to know about hands floating on the water and rising up, what it was like to move away and come around, whether or not you kept your head up, and how was your follow through. It's a lot to remember. All right, so last arrow, how was your follow through?
Good.
Felt pretty good? Okay. Was your last arrow follow through the same or different than your first two?
I think it was a little bit different.
And was different how?
I think it felt more pressed onto my face.
What do you mean by it felt more pressed on?
The hand felt like it was more on the face. The others, it wasn't as pressed onto the face, the hand.
Interesting. So let's talk about that real quick for a minute, because when it comes to good follow through and good anchor connection, this is you just mentioned something that I think a lot about. I heard you say that your third arrow, your hand felt, or your anchor felt more pressed onto your face. Can you tell me when exactly did it feel more pressed onto your face?
While I was pulling it back.
Interesting. Okay, so let's talk about your first two arrows then. How would you describe the way your hand came off the string and into follow through for those first two arrows?
Well, the follow through was different, I think, because the hand wasn't as much like on the face. It was more like this.
Okay, got it. So how would you describe that, or why? I'm really pushing you to think really, really hard or carefully about this stuff. Aally I would just tell somebody, but we're kind of on a roll here with the question and answers, I think. So, why would your hand come away from your face as it comes off the string for your first two arrows, but then stay really tight to your face on your third?
I think on the third arrow, I just held it there more, I guess.
Okay.
And just kept it on the face longer, I think, and more when I brought it back rather than on the first two where it was more like this.
Got it. Okay. That's something we can talk about a little bit more later. But in the big picture, it's preferable to me that your hook follow closer to your face than come away from your face when your hook comes off the string. Let's talk real quick about your head. Were you able to keep your head up?
I kind of forgot that part.
You did? Okay. So is keeping your head up something that you have to be really careful about?
Yeah.
When during your shot sequence do you think it makes sense to think about your head position?
Right when I'm starting, if I keep it like this the whole time, it helps. And then while I'm drawing back, I think, okay, is my head up? And if it's not up, then I move it up. And if it is, then I keep it where it is.
Got it. Okay, so part of the shooting process would be that you set your feet, set your posture, set your head before you even set your hook and grip. And so I'm really glad that you said that if you set your head at the very beginning, that it's easier to keep it there than it is to move your head into position later. I call that front loading. That's kind of my term. When you front load as many things as you can during a certain shot or during every shot, then you have less you have to manage once you commit, once you begin. When during your shot cycle do you think your head is most likely to move?
Well, if it's not there at the beginning, sometimes it doesn't get there if I forget to check while I'm drawing the bow. But while I'm drawing the bow, it kind of tilts sometimes.
Got it. So you just demonstrated what I've seen, but you said something different. You said, I heard you say that your head can move when you're drawing the bow, and that's true. But when you demonstrated your head moving, were you drawing or was your hand pretty close to the anchor position?
Pretty close to the anchor.
That's when I see your head move. Is about when you come to anchor, you sort of tip your head. And we should probably talk about that more. Also, So that would be more important than talking about like this whole follow through thing. But I'm really glad you mentioned it, and I'm really glad that you noticed it, because it's super important. And so we can figure that out. The final thing that I want to ask you about, unless you remember something that I said and I left out, but I wanted to ask you about this metaphor, this analogy of your hands rising in the water. Is that something that you thought about?
Yeah, I had them rise in the water, kind of.
And is that something that works for you?
Yeah.
Okay. Does it work super well for you, or is it just kind of something, well, coach told me to do it, so I'll do it?
It works well for me.
Okay. So here's what I'm thinking. I think about this a lot too. I want to try to give you as many cues as I possibly can, right? In fact, if you don't mind, show the camera the tape on the back of your hand, right? So we've got a visual cue on the back of the hand to help you remember how to hold your bow hand, right? We've got hands on the water, floating up as the water rises. We've got move away, come around, right? Sort of building up a vocabulary of different cues for you, right? And my hope is that they all work for you. But I'm just going to suggest that they're only going to work for you if they make sense when you tell yourself about them. That's kind of obvious, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm going to trust you to tell me, hey, yeah, I know that you explained to me that, setting my hands on the water, and then as the water rises, my hands float up. That makes a lot of sense as an explanation for what I'm doing. But to be honest with you, Coach, I really am just kind of thinking about other stuff when I raise the bow, right? Then we have a situation where maybe it's a good cue for somebody, but not for you, right? Here's a question, last question. While you're executing your shot, do you ever think moving this way or that way is like this or that? Or have you kind of come up with your own explanations for things?
I've kind of come up with explanations for things, especially when like the arrow goes super off or whatever.
Okay.
Then I have to think, okay, did I move the bow just as I was releasing, or did I didn't string walking off or something?
Got it. Okay, so I would call that evaluation, right? You're thinking about what happened when the shot was executed. I guess let me try to ask this question a little different. Because what I'm wondering is, while you're trying to shoot, do you ever kind of talk to yourself about the way you're moving into position?
Yeah, I kind of think about like push away and come around, and when I remember, keep the head up.
Okay, got it. So you are kind of thinking through your shot. Got it. Okay. Very good. Let's wrap up the video. Thank you all for watching.